1:40 in the Mountain Time Zone. You're with BC Today. I'm Michelle Eliot. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, tomorrow is World Alzheimer's Day. More than 500,000 Canadians live with some form of dementia. And this month, a BC group is launching a new guide, a kind of tool to empower people living with dementia and advocate for change in their community. They're called the Flipping Stigma Action Group, and we're going to be joined by the co-leaders in just a moment. We're also taking your calls. How can we empower and support people living with dementia? You can give us a call, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 or email us, bctoday@cbc.ca. And I have two guests here with me in studio. Alison Finney is a professor at the UBC School of Nursing and co-director of the Center for Research on Personhood in Dementia. And Jim Mann is a community advocate who has been living with dementia for 17 years. They are the co-leaders of the action group behind this new toolkit. Alison and Jim, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Well, it's very good to have you with us. And can you tell me how this action group came about, Alison?
Well, a number of years ago, we applied for funding from the Canadian Institutes of Health Research. And we wanted to do research with people with dementia. So we invited them to join us. Mm-hmm. And it really took on a life of its own. It's become a much more powerful thing than I ever thought it would be possible.
How many people became involved?
I don't know, Jim. I think over the last number of years, it's been maybe 10 to 11 people. Mm. People have come and gone. Yeah. I think we're a group of about 6 or 7 today.
And Jim, for yourself, why did you feel it was important to become involved?
Well, I was fortunate enough to join Alison and the other co-leader of the project, Dr. Deb O'Connor, in formulating the application for funding. And in working out some of the details, it became I realized how important the project would be. Mm. My mother had Alzheimer's, and so I saw the stigma and reactions, and with my own diagnosis, there is a need for a group of individuals with dementia to get together and move forward, and they worked on the toolkit, mm-hmm. and then ultimately the guide.
And you said that you observed how the stigma affected your mother and yourself as well. As far as you're comfortable, can you tell us about that? You know, what you have faced?
Well, I guess for me personally, I've been somewhat fortunate in that I've been way too outspoken about my diagnosis. So a lot of people are told before there was any thought of this, of reacting in a stigma sort of way. Mm. But I certainly saw it with my mother in independent living, how she would sit with the other 3 people every day for the meals. And then one day I went on my way back home from downtown and went over, and there were 4 people at the table, and one of them was not my mother. And so where is she? And they pointed to the table in the corner and said, "Oh, she's over there." And so I guess they got tired of the stories, the same stories or the same questions or whatever it was. And so, viewing it through others' eyes and through others' experiences, there's certainly the realization that there is a real need to address it.
Mm. What is the impact of that stigma on people?
I think it's enormous. Mm. The example,
sighing there, yeah.
Yeah. I think Jim's story is one very good example. I think it forces people to withdraw. They lose social connections. They lose friends. They're no longer listened to. People in our action group have talked a lot about their frustration in going to see the doctor, and the doctor no longer talks to them, but talks to a family member. Not being taken seriously, not being believed that maybe you have dementia. I could go on. Should I go on?
Well, Jim, I mean, you were shaking
powerful.
your head there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because people will feel it's demeaning to sit in a room, perhaps with other family members, and have everybody talk around you as if you're not there.
Mm.
And that's the part. And you know, there's a story I've often told in presentations about a fellow longtime member of a golf club. People would go to him for rules, for help with anything around the club. He would organize men's night. And the day after they heard about his diagnosis, no one went to him about a rule. And they immediately said, "Oh, don't worry. We'll look after men's night."
Wow.
As if in 12 hours, 24 hours, he went from being totally capable to totally incapable.
And I'll ask you about how to empower people then in the face of that in a moment. My guests are Alison Finney, professor at the UBC School of Nursing and co-director of the Center for Research on Personhood and Dementia. Jim Mann is a community advocate who has been living with dementia for 17 years. They're co-leaders of this action group, and this action group has put together a Flipping Stigma toolkit to empower people living with dementia and to be able to make change in their community as well. We want to ask you, how can we empower people who are living with dementia, and how can we support them too? If you're someone who is living with dementia, what is it that you would like to see? What impact does stigma have on you? And how do we change that? What would you like to see? Love to hear from you. 1-800-825. You can hear Jim reacting there. 1-800-8. You said you were outspoken. Our phone number is 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 as well. Our email is bctoday@cbc.ca. And so what is in this toolkit? You know, I went through it and read some of the stories of the participants as well. But what can people learn as to advocacy, self-advocacy, and self-empowerment? Yeah, Jim.
I think they will learn that once a person is diagnosed, life goes on.
Mm.
Reading the toolkit information and viewing the videos, they will hear the frustration from the action group members, but they will also hear what is possible. They will also realize that there's a group of people who all have dementia, and over Zoom, because I would venture to say 85% of the meetings were over Zoom because of COVID, etc. And so this group of people put together a toolkit over Zoom that is online. I was part of the research team. I've done this, not necessarily over Zoom, but I found it frustrating to try to visualize the toolkit from what we were talking about on Zoom,
right,
and visualize what it would look like on a computer screen, and so they were an effective group, but you know, they, as part of the whole project, they created a T-shirt. They said, you know, there's a sense of optimism.
Mm.
And so they created a T-shirt with a student from Emily Carr University, and along the T-shirt, the tagline, if you will, was dementia ... celebrate life.
Wow.
And so
that
I think
optimism.
that's the primary message.
Okay. What are the tools that are most important that you've heard?
The tools in the toolkit?
Yeah.
I think one of the most powerful things have been the video clips that you've talked about. This was not top-down work with experts identifying answers, but rather the powerful thing are these stories that have been told by the people themselves about the challenges they've faced and how they're pushing back.
Right.
And when you go to the website, you hear those voices in conversation. You see some videos. You hear people telling the stories about how they have become aware of the possibilities that exist in their life moving forward to live a good life.
It's that visibility, isn't it?
Absolutely.
With a T-shirt as well that you were talking about, Jim. Let's take a call now. Michelle is joining us from Salt Spring Island as we ask you, how can we empower and support people living with dementia? Michelle, welcome to the show. Hi, Michelle. Oh, I think we have lost our connection with Michelle. I apologize for that. Michelle, if you want to give us a call back, it's 1-800-825-5950. Toll free. And Michelle was talking about working with seniors and what she's observed there as well. We'd love to hear from you, Michelle, if you please would give us a call back. And so we've been talking about the tools that have been important. As I understand it as well, the toolkit has been used in workshops at care homes and community centers and neighborhood houses. What is being taught to supporters and caregivers?
I think one of the things we've heard from caregivers, from people living in the community who really, we see the need, we want to help, but people aren't confident. They're afraid they're going to say the wrong thing. They're not sure how to talk to someone with dementia. And this toolkit, I think, goes a long way toward relieving some of that anxiety and allowing people, I think, to have empathy, to kind of put themselves in someone's shoes, imagine what it would be like if it would be me, and how would I want to be approached.
Yeah.
So I think it's been quite powerful in that way. I think we've seen people become much more confident to take that step.
Okay, relieving that anxiety. What should people know when working with a person living with dementia? Or interacting and having those conversations. You said earlier that the friends that your mother had got tired, perhaps, and what Michelle was going to say was alluding to patience as well. So, what should people know? What are the things that we should incorporate?
They're human.
Yeah.
Really, at the end of the day, you get the diagnosis and you don't go immediately to long-term care. There is a journey involved. Some journeys are longer than others, but there is still a journey. And during that journey, people, you can approach a person, you can talk to that person. You may well, be asked the same question again, or repeat yourself, but you go with it, and you can encourage the storytelling. You can encourage and engage. And you will be surprised at the capabilities and the ability to carry on a conversation, and the desire to carry on that conversation.
That empathy, once again.
Yeah.
We have Steve joining us from the Okanagan now. And Steve, what's your experience?
I'm a caregiver living with my wife who has early onset Alzheimer's. One thing, I've just recently been introduced to the Flipping Stigma project, and I've seen the shirt and it looks great. But what I like about it is that whenever we see a commercial or a fundraiser or something like that on TV, we always get kind of depressed after seeing it, because it kind of shows older folks and losing touch with their family, and it's kind of a sad moment for us. And with what I've seen with the Flipping Stigma project, there's a lot of positivity to it, which is encouraging for me. Whether I can get my wife to kind of, and I'm not too familiar with the tools as of yet. I do want to do some more reading there, but for me, I guess it would just help us with more of a positive outlook, more tools to kind of use to kind of keep the dementia in the back of our minds, not at the forefront,
Yeah. Steve, what a great point. Thank you so much for the call. All the best to you and your wife, okay?
Thanks.
Thank you. And this is something that you've been talking about. And it's interesting because you've been commenting, Jim, on the footage that you're seeing that we're airing as well, which is, this is us putting together what's out there, which is the usual image of really a lot of care involved, which is part of the journey. But it is a journey, as you said.
It's stereotypical.
And
And
I'm learning, yeah.
that everybody is frail, is elderly. Usually they're unable to communicate. And that's the stereotypical model that we see in newspapers and so on.
But that needs to be addressed as well when it comes to the environment and inclusivity, does it not, Alison?
To be able to
With the population that does need more care.
it is true. But it is also true, I'm talking more and more with my students about dementia is a chronic disease. People live with this for a very long time. And as Jim said, we have tended what we imagine, and then what Steve talked about, we imagine people who are at the end of that journey. And certainly care is really important. We need to do a much, much better at creating good supportive care environments. But this work is really also about turning our attention to the communities, to our families, our neighbors, and recognizing we need to do community differently as well, because people are living long, good lives in community, and it needs to be much better so that people are more included.
I look forward to seeing the T-shirt. It sounds wonderful.
We should have worn them.
That's right. Really good to have you both. And where can they see this resource?
So the website is flippingstigma.com.
Flippingstigma.com. So good to meet you both. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Alison Finney is a professor at the UBC School of Nursing and co-director of the Center for Research on Personhood in Dementia. Jim Mann is a community advocate who has been living with dementia for 17 years. Again, it's flippingstigma.com. I'm Michelle Eliot. Thank you so much for listening to the program and watching us as well on our live stream. Thanks to everyone who called in. Really appreciated hearing your stories today. You can listen again on the CBC Listen app and watch us on demand on the CBC Vancouver YouTube page. Thank you. Have a good afternoon. We'll talk tomorrow.